Stories have power. I believe in the power of stories. That's why they're the first gift we give children. They're how we explain the world to them and their place in it. I'm an indigenous nerd, professionally. And I believe in the power of stories to do something even bigger, to decolonize. That's right, stories, I believe, can decolonize, break down systematic racism, oppression, and even colonization. Stories can build walls, but I believe they can also tear them down. So let's talk stories. The stories I want to talk about today are stories of tradition, handed down over multiple generations. Stories of gravitas. I'm talking about Disney today. That's right, Disney. Near and dear to the hearts of so many people, including myself, Disney is the largest storytelling machine ever to have existed. That's right, Disney is so powerful that even if you don't Disney, we both know you still know the words to let it go. So when was the first time you saw someone that looked like you on screen? For me, I was a little girl, and her name was Tiger Lily. So what was her story in Peter Pan? Well, my friends, she was a damsel in distress. Worse, she wasn't even the main damsel in distress. She was the side quest damsel in distress. For her part, she's kidnapped by an adult male pirate in his continuation of a feud with a child. The feud, of course, begins when the child disarticulated the pirate's hand and fed the hand to a crocodile with a clock speech impediment. None of which is about Tiger Lily. To be clear, none of the movie of Peter Pan is really about Tiger Lily. So it should come as no surprise to find out that Tiger Lily doesn't speak once, not one time in the whole movie. She is present, but my friends, she does not matter. Second princess on the docket, Pocahontas, one of the most internationally most beloved indigenous characters ever to have existed. She is also responsible for giving me unrealistic expectations about my hair. That's fine. What is the story we're told? Well, a beautiful indigenous woman feels stifled by her culture and is looking for adventure, so she dates Mel Gibson, aka John Smith. They meet and fall in love essentially at first sight, even though this is a scene in which, and this is true, he pulls a gun on her, which is what we refer to in the social work biz as a red flag. There's then a war that she must stop between the indigenous peoples defending themselves against violent invaders and said invaders. She does this by stopping her father from executing her boyfriend Mel Gibson, aka John Smith. In the ensuing violence, John Smith actually gets shot by a friend of his, and this is true, Christian Bale. John Smith is then put on a boat and sent back to England, leaving Pocahontas behind. Credits roll. So here's the thing. Her name wasn't really Pocahontas. And she didn't fall in love with John Smith or Mel Gibson. I do not have peer-reviewed sources on her ability to paint with all the colors of the wind, but I digress. Her names, given to her into the tradition of her people, were Matoaka and Aminote. And she was an ambassador, a translator, a social worker, a spy. And like so many indigenous women, a survivor of violence. You see, she was kidnapped too, not by a pirate, but by the same soldiers, settler soldiers that she was trying to help. She was imprisoned for more than a year. She was then informed she had been converted to Christianity, stripped of her names, and called Rebecca. Then she was sent to England to gain financial backing for the colonial effort as a poster child for the good work of colonization. as a living billboard to the civilized savage. She was 21 years old when she died. Some say it was poison, others say it was disease, but I can tell you this. Her body was buried and lost in an English graveyard 3,736 miles from her home. And her story, the fiction of it, continues to frame the way the world looks at Indigenous peoples. And today, more than 2 million people claim to be the direct descendant of the woman they still call Pocahontas. 2 princesses, Tiger Lily and Pocahontas, one without a voice, playing a bit part in someone else's narrative, the other had her story pulled to pieces, stitched together to serve someone else's purpose. They told her truth in their image. The great Indigenous storyteller Thomas King says, "The truth about stories is that's all we are." So you have to be careful with the stories you tell, and you have to watch out for the stories you are told. I believe in the power of story. So what has Disney learned about the stories they tell? Well, in 2016, Disney decided to tell the story of a Polynesian islander princess named Moana. And they did a couple things differently. First, they hired Taika Waititi, who besides being one of the coolest storytellers working today, also happens to be of Polynesian islander heritage. Second, they created the Oceanic Trust, a cultural advisory board filled with Polynesian islander traditional knowledge keepers, storytellers, and community members. And third, they filled the film with Polynesian islander actors, including that of the main role of Moana. So how was the story different? Well, Moana is not about a girl looking for a boyfriend, I will tell you that much. Moana is about a young woman risking her life to save her community, to bring healing and balance to the land and the water, to honor her culture and her ancestors. That's Moana's story. So Disney, I'm gonna give you some points for Moana. I will give you some points for Moana, but I still have a bone to pick. You see, in the movie, Moana actually gets called a princess, and she says, "I'm not a princess." And the character of Maui responds, "If you wear a dress and you got an animal sidekick, you're a princess." To that, I have one more story to tell. A survivor of the residential school system faces racism and cultural oppression and grows into an extraordinary woman. Now a mother, one day an Indian agent comes to her home. He has come to take her son to residential school, a place she not only survived, but she knows that it has higher death rates for children than soldiers like her husband faced in World War II. So she stands in her driveway, her son pushed behind her with one hand and a kitchen knife in the other, and she says, "No." The Indian agent, he left childless that day, and he never came back. And the woman, she wasn't a princess. She didn't paint with all the colors of the wind. She was my grandmother. And because of her, I am standing here. Indigenous peoples did not have princesses, not in the time of Pocahontas and not today. We have grandmothers, aunties, sisters, mothers, two-spirit cousins who guided, led, and protected us. They were scientists, engineers, poets, doctors, all around badasses. They were a power unto themselves. We are a power unto ourselves. But the world keeps telling Tiger Lily and Pocahontas stories, and we are reaping the harms of those stories today. And let me be clear, If you choose not to listen to the stories of the oppressed and the ignored, the stories of the hurt and the hurting, folks will have no choice but to take it to the streets until there is real, meaningful change. So if you are someone who has representation in the stories all around you, this is my challenge to you, my friends. Go and listen at someone else's fire. Support with your resources the stories of those who've been silenced and ignored. Question the stories you've been told. Ask who told them and why. And get ready, because we have extraordinary stories to tell, our stories in our ways. And to my cousins, to everyone whose stories have been stolen, ignored, or silenced, now is the time. Now is the time for us to go name and claim our stories. Speak them from our own lips, write them with our own hands, dance them with our own feet, tell them in our own language. And Disney, when you're ready for some more new stories, I'll be ready. This Indigenerd will be waiting. Remember, the truth about stories is that's all we are. Thank you.